So I have rehashed the Bryan Callen show, and this is a podcast I love doing because I get to talk to people who are smarter than I am, and who expand my understanding. So my next guest is none other than David Steinberg. Now, if you are in my circle of interests, you probably don't know who he is. But if you're in the business world, especially if you're a player in the business world, like a real player, you know who David Steinberg is. And I quote you a lot because you're my neighbor, but more importantly, every time I have a point of view on something, I always check in with you. And I realize that everybody else is telling me one thing. And then I talk to a guy who's actually in the game, doing the thing. And it's like going down to somebody on a court or in the ring and saying, hey, does this actually work? And you go, no, what are you talking about? So you are one of my reality checks. And I want to just give the people out there a little bio. I know you don't like talking about, money and what you've done, even though every time you leave the room, I tell everybody.
And yet you're going to do it anyway.
Well, I'm just going to say that you have done a couple things that very few people have done. It's one thing to take a company public, and we all know what that means, but you've done that twice. You've taken 2 companies public, and then you've sold 4 other companies.
Yeah,
I believe.
Sold 4, took 2 public, and then I'm chairman of another as well.
And you're chairman of another, which is what?
It's OnDemand Pharmaceuticals. It's developing a 3D printer to create drugs.
Yes. So there you go. There you go. Just a business I didn't think existed. And what I like is that you
it didn't before we invented it.
Well, until you invented it. What I always get a kick out is I
but
like talking to the guys that I meet through you who are players themselves or who work for you or around you, with you.
With me.
And I get all the, I get 2 things from them. One, they say 2 things about you. One, you're insanely disciplined. And 2, you're the smartest business person they've ever met in terms of your ability to see what needs to be done better, or your ability to see when something is needed in the marketplace.
And by the way, that's because I'm either paying them or
Yes.
they don't know that many people, right?
Yeah.
So they've got a very small sphere,
Well, I'll take it.
or
though.
I'm paying them. So it's working.
True. I understand. But so anyway, I wanted to kind of get to picking your brain on a whole bunch of stuff.
Here we go.
I know, because there's a lot of information out there. And it comes from people who seem to have a periphery understanding of how the world really works. Can you fill in the blanks for me of what you've done politically as well, please? Because, you are a leader in business. You are somebody that anybody who is in politics or in business knows.
I don't know about anybody,
Well,
but a few.
You're a leader. You're a mover. You're a shaker, for lack of a better expression, because I'm not very articulate.
You're actually very articulate.
I do my best. You were Joe Biden's vice chairman.
I was one of his vice chairmen on his finance committee. Yes.
Okay, one of the vice chairman on his finance. So you've had a lot of interaction with him.
Yeah.
You know the Clintons very well.
Well, yes. Terry McAuliffe, Governor McAuliffe, former head of the DNC, is one of my very, very close friends, and Bill Clinton is Terry's best friend. So
Got it.
Got to know them well over the years through that.
I can just hear all the people watching going, he's one of the elites. He drinks the blood of babies. He is, this is where we get all this stuff.
Well, the truth of the matter is I'm probably the furthest thing from an elite. I grew up a kid in New York City, very dyslexic, very ADD, didn't do incredibly well in school, worked hard. I became an entrepreneur for the same reason a lot of us become entrepreneurs. Nobody would hire me out of school, Brian.
Is that right?
Yeah. So my first job out of school was I was the chief intern for Senator Kennedy on the Judiciary Committee under a then very young Senator Biden, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And I started working on wireless issues, amongst other things. And I was like, I think wireless is going to work. And I think it's going to be really cool. And after a very brief stint in the insurance industry, selling insurance, I ended up founding a company called Sterling Cellular, and then ended up building three other total wireless companies, but not what you would consider elite.
So you weren't in you weren't dancing around a fireplace
No.
with Klaus Schwab and all the rest.
If the Illuminati exists, I haven't gotten the invite.
But you do know, and you do spend time with some of the most powerful people in the world.
But I'm like, I joke, Brian, I'm like Forrest Gump. Like, I literally end up in the room and hanging out with these people, and I look around and I have no idea how I got there. But yet they keep inviting me back, and I keep getting to hang out.
Dude, you're about to get jumped in. That's what's going to happen.
Well,
You're about to get jumped in.
I think the truth is, my wife would tell you, because I'm like very much like you are. I'm playing way above the rim on wife. There's no reason my wife should be married to me. But she would say my single biggest attribute is humor.
Yeah.
And my ability to make people laugh. And that's gotten me pretty far.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, it's also the fact that you've done some stuff.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate.
And I think people want to be close to somebody who seems to win a lot more than they lose.
Yeah. When you talk about culture, and it's Zeta Global, which is my 100% day job, where we're a big data and artificial intelligence platform company that helps enterprises to better manage their marketing and business intelligence. It's all about a culture of winning. That's literally what I like to talk about. How do you build a culture where you can push responsibility down and decision-making down as far as you can into the organization possible and track the metrics properly and make people feel like when they're accomplishing things, we're winning together. And, it goes back to people want to be with winners, right?
How many people work for Zeta?
So today, Zeta has about 1,700 employees.
1,700 people. It's a lot of people to manage and to keep motivated and inspired.
Well, thank God for Steve Gerber, my president, chief operating officer, who the vast majority report up through, and then Steve Vine, my general counsel, and then Chris Greiner, my CFO. I'd say 90+% of our people report up through them.
How do you? One of the things you've met some of my friends, you've met some people. You assess people very quickly. I think that's fair to say. And
I think most people assess people very quickly. I just don't know if people are right all the time. So I think most humans assess other humans in under a minute, and they make a lot of decisions in that minute on the people that they're meeting for the first time. I tend to be making decisions on people very quickly as well.
But your decisions have big ramifications. So what is it that you do you have a checklist, or is it just instinct?
It's one of those things where everybody always says, how do you teach intuitiveness, right? How do you teach street smarts? How do you teach the ability to have a high aptitude for risk? Like, these are the things that all sort of play into entrepreneurism, which is sort of what I am at my heart. And the answer is people can fine tune their skills around it, but it's hard to teach it. It's like, I see you when we're out and just how people gravitate towards you and how funny you are without insulting people other than perhaps me.
Yes.
Which you're very good
I
at
like to
insulting
insult
me.
you.
No, but
it's
that's
the
okay.
only thing I have over you.
By the way, somebody, like, as my wife would say, like, other than my kids, you're probably, my guy on that wall, so to speak.
Well, dude, you're at least 4 inches taller than I am. You've got those baby blues.
I think you're being polite to yourself.
Dude, no. I'm not giving you more. I'm not giving you more than 4 inches.
I am substantially taller
Get out
than
of
you
here.
than
I'm
that,
giving you
but,
4 inches tops.
Which is why you gave me a chair that I can tell is shorter than your
That's
chair
what you
on
get.
purpose.
That's
I'm
what you
just
get.
saying.
And I was going to say you're a natural blonde, but here's the thing. And so I need something to get over. But yeah, so a lot of this is just instinct. It's kind of the way you see business. Like, I think one time I said, how do you do this? How would you bottle this entrepreneur, this ability to, create a successful company? And I think you said something like, well, did you ever see The Queen's Gambit? And I said, yeah. And he said, I see business the way she sees a checkers board.
I'm not sure I see it quite as well as she sees it, but I see it in a similar way. And I look at some of my closest friends like Michael Rubin and Mike Milken and other who, by the way, make me look like I'm a rookie at business.
And what about an aptitude for risk?
Well, so people always talk, and you, I know you love this rap of mine, so I appreciate your throwing it in there. But the reality is people always say, don't you have to be a risk taker to be an entrepreneur? And the answer is sure. Like, you've got to be willing to take the risk of failing. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, I call it a very high aptitude for risk, not a high tolerance for risk. To me, tolerance for risk is you can take very silly risks. An aptitude for risk is you make very good risk decisions. By way of example, would you bet $1 to win 5 cents?
No.
That's a bad bet, right? Would you bet $1 to win $100?
Of course.
If you knew the worst you could do is lose 50 cents of that $1. You can say, of course.
And
again,
that, of course, yeah.
That's an aptitude for risk.
Got it.
An experience. And for me, it's been failing a lot because I've failed a lot over the years. And, one of the things that Mike Milken, who's a great financier, runs the Milken Institute, founded the Prostate Cancer Foundation. One of my mentors, and I'm very close to Mike, always says, one of the great things about America is we actually forgive failure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important.
And I'm telling you,
you can live to fight another day.
You can.
Politically, we can't lose that.
Yeah.
Business-wise, right? Yeah.
And by the way, we don't recognize often in this country how much of an anomaly that is. Like, if you're in, and I don't want to pick on any individual countries, but if you're in the vast majority of the European Union and you fail, you're never going to raise capital again.
Wow.
It's just not going to happen. Whereas here, you look at so many entrepreneurs who have at one time or another failed. I've failed multiple times. You get up off the canvas and you get back out. And when Mike said that to me, it was really interesting as I thought about it.
How do you talk to yourself? Do you have a routine in the morning, or are you just a guy who just gets up and you just go?
So those are two completely different questions. To answer the first question first, I talk to myself a lot, and I tend to be pretty ADD, as I'm sure you've noticed from hanging out with me.
You and I both, dude.
Yeah. And I will repeat things many times, but it is very frustrating, I think, to some of the people around me.
Yeah.
But it does lead to that discipline, right? So I talk to myself all the time, and I had a tough sort of upbringing with a divorce with my parents, and ended up living with my dad for a while, then going to boarding school and a whole bunch of things. And I was in therapy for many years to try to get comfortable with myself, try to sort of get out there. I know some people can solve those types of situations without it. I needed somebody to talk to. And when I graduated from therapy, which I feel like I did, I almost became the ability to become my own therapist, where I can sort of talk myself off the ledge. Well, not always. Sometimes I get particularly agitated or deal with it. So I do talk to myself, and my process tends to be very iterative. I can convince myself of almost anything, but the balance of myself is like, no, that's not right. Don't do that. That's stupid. You think you're right, but you're wrong.
How do you talk yourself off the ledge for people who, because everybody wants to be successful.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to be consistent. And it's so hard.
Well, it's interesting. First, I will disagree with you. I don't think everybody truly wants to be successful, because I don't think everybody's willing to pay the price that you have to pay to be successful. I think a lot of people are very happy. I mean, there's 8.2 billion people on this planet, and I think a lot of them are very, very happy living the way they live. I just watched the Blue Zone documentary, and there's some of the happiest people in the world. Just
You and I are going to die a lot.
Right. We're going to be dead. They're going to be living to 122.
They're all about community and
Right.
gardening
They
and
love
taking
each
walks.
other, and they're like
I hate
cooking
everybody.
with sweet potatoes, and they're doing. So I'll start by saying I don't think everybody cares.
That's a good point. God, that's a good point.
But for those of us who do, of which I'm certainly not going to be a blue zone guy. I'm trying, but
Yeah.
I don't think I'll get there. I think a lot of it is discipline, and a lot of it is you've got to be willing to pay the price of success, which by the way, everything has a give and take. Everything.
Trade-offs.
Yeah.
Trade-offs. And everything has it's anything worth it is got its level of discomfort. It just does, man. Like I always look at it this way. I always say to people, look, it may be cloudy. If you stick around long enough, the clouds will dissipate. You've just got to have part of what's hard is figuring out and admitting to yourself what you honestly revere, what you honestly want. That's a huge
I think that's a big part of it. And I think, to your point, tenacity. I think most people give up way too early, right? Because of the discomfort and because of not being able to sort of get there as fast as they want. One of the great examples I always talk about is Cornelius Vanderbilt was the wealthiest man in the world when he died. And by the time his grandchildren finished their lives, they were all broke. And, you look at sometimes when stuff comes easy, it's easy to fetter away. And if you look at how hard it is to get there, you want to keep it. Like you want to relish it. And I think you can reverse engineer that, right? It's like when it does come easy, often it goes away. And it's very, very hard to be successful. And by the way, success doesn't have to be money. I mean, it is certainly
fulfillment, meaning,
helping people, wealth.
Well, I had that thought the other day, dude. I was thinking about this. Like,
was that unusual for you?
It's usually very unusual. It's usually just a feeling. But you and I were drinking this crazy bottle of wine. We hadn't seen each other for a long time. And you're doing your thing, and I thought to myself, what I really cherish here is I think you and I are going to be friends forever. Like that's a big deal.
Assuming you don't mess it up.
Well, I'll do my best. But like just the conversations we were having, like just we're drinking wine, we're hanging out, we're talking for 4 hours about just bullshit.
Our wives are yelling at us.
Yeah,
what are you two doing?
Exactly. And that to me is worth a lot more than almost anything else. Look, money buys you a great view. You travel differently, all that great stuff. But if you don't have that level of intimacy, that ability to kind of,
so here's there was a study done at Harvard, and it was done, I believe, I forget the exact period, but it was 80 or 90 years over multiple generations. And this was tens of thousands of people studied. I believe the number was 78,000, but I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. And the study was solely focused on happiness. And who's happy, who's not happy. And the three things that they found amongst all others in this multi-generational Harvard study were, first and foremost, by far, the happiest people had deep and meaningful relationships with many people. Not just their nuclear family. They have friends, they have relatives, they have family. 2, health. They're healthy. They focus on diet, they focus on exercise, they do the things that they know to do, right? So what are the 2 things that would cut our health cost in half as a country? The elimination of obesity and the elimination of smoking, right? But we'll get into that later. And 3, they have enough. They have what they need. And the crazy thing is that number was like $80,000 a year in income, in current income. Wasn't millions.
wow.
But I know people who are billionaires very well, who are miserable humans because all they do is worry about the fact that guy's got the G7 and I'm sitting on my G5.
Is that true?
Not joking.
Is that true, man?
By the way, I know people who are like former supermodels who are miserable because of FOMO on Instagram, because they're seeing everybody in Mykonos or everybody in Ibiza, and they're not there that week. And forget about the fact most of it's bullshit. If I can say that on this podcast.
You can swear as much as you want.
Thank you. Well, don't tell me that.
I know.
I
Open the floodgates.
Right. Don't open the floodgates there.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, one of the three most determinant factors in happiness is having what you need. And to me, it's do you make enough so that you can make the choices you want in life?
Yeah.
And then, listen, it's nice to make more. And it's certainly a measuring stick for our society on are you successful or not. And it's sort of, I joke, it's the never-ending quest with the ever-moving goal line, right? No matter what you make.
We all want, we lurch from want to want. And part of that is, that's always the challenge, is it comes down to value system. But that's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Having enough of what you need, having enough long, meaningful, lasting relationships and health. And the two factors that cut that in half are obesity and smoking.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I'm not sure all of the science supports exactly
of course.
But the other thing I would say is one of the worst remakes of a movie, or not remakes, but the worst sequels of a movie ever was Wall Street 2. Or whatever they called it, Money Never Sleeps. And I'm a huge Michael Douglas fan. I'm also a huge Josh Brolin fan, and I'm a big fan of the whole cast. But one of the greatest lines in the history of movies came out of the movie Wall Street, right? Greed, wasn't greed as good. Greed, for the lack of a better word, is good. It cuts through and clarifies, right? And then he goes into the whole soliloquy, right? In the second movie, there's a scene where Shia LaBeouf is in the office with Josh Brolin, who Josh Brolin's playing sort of the bad guy, the Gordon Gekko reincarnate. And, obviously you have the young lad coming up in, I just said his name.
Shia LaBeouf.
In Shia LaBeouf. And Shia LaBeouf says to him, how much do you want? What's your number? Like that used to be a big thing on Wall Street. What's your number?
What's your number?
And some guys would say 10, other guys would say 50, some guys would say 100, some guys would say a bill, right? Like whatever. And he looked at Josh Brolin and he said to Josh Brolin, what's your number? And Josh Brolin looked at him and said, more. And it really...
That's a bad place to be.
Correct. And by the way, he was never happy. I mean, he's one of the great actors.
There are people, I know a guy who I'm sure you know, who's, he's got, I think he's worth something like $37 billion. And he is addicted to making money. He has an addiction, and at the expense of his family and at the expense of everybody. So it's like anything else.
And I find most of my close friends, many of which are incredibly successful, worth billions of dollars. It's the building that we all care about. It's actually not necessarily the money. It's building something.
I see with you, you're
great.
not you're not into anything. The only thing you're into is really good wine, which is why I'm friends with you.
I was going to say, that's about the only reason you like me, right?
Because you're next door and I get to go over and drink stupid wine. And the fact that you haven't given me a key to your wine cellar when you're out of town means that you're not a real friend.
I don't want it to be empty when I get back, Brian.
I just need to do a tasting to make sure everything is on the up and up and the temperature's good.
I understand.
But it's so obvious that what drives you is building something. You just love the game.
I love to build. And I'm saying most of my friends are really focused on building something. And it's always been the more interesting people to me who are, it's a byproduct of what we do, but it's not the driver.
Right.
And it never has. I mean, the driver was initially to not be broke. Like I started my first job, I made $17,500 a year, right? That was like, I didn't feel good even back then. I mean, I'm old, but
you never thought you'd get to this point, or did you? You probably did.
No. I listen. I always assumed I would do well, right?
Well, when you sold your first company, and you realized, that's for a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
what did you do that day? Did you say to yourself, I don't have to work anymore? What happened?
Well, it already started my next company. So I literally usually overlap them. And I've done that other than with Zeta.
So you've always been moving.
But Zeta's different. Zeta's really a company that I believe can be one of the few game-changing companies out there. And I don't say that often.
Why?
Because if you look at the data cloud that we own, and you look at our patent portfolio around artificial intelligence, and I sort of joke, we've been talking about AI for 7 to 10 years, not 7 to 10 months. And you talk about our ability to help marketers better manage their marketing on a substantially more cost-efficient way. And then you think about the fact that the marketing global ecosystem in 2024 will cross over $1 trillion a year in total addressable market.
That's 1,000 billion, everybody.
Yeah. Be the first time that the global marketing spend goes over $1 trillion will be next year. It's pretty close this year. You just start to think about what the opportunity for a company like Zeta is. And I don't think most of Wall Street understands us, because it's funny, when we started the company, the goal was displace 20 different individual companies that were providing the services we provide in one platform. We call them point solutions, right? And because we combine all 20 of them into one place, it's very hard for Wall Street to put us in a box. Oh. They don't really understand. Oh, you don't do this plus this.
Because they don't really understand your business model yet.
Nobody does.
And well, again, this is what you do. You're kind of ahead of the curve, and that's a huge part of it. I want to get to the look. You know some of the most powerful people in the world. David, who's running the world? David, I have you on the Bryan Callen show. Who's running the world? Is there anybody in charge? The elites. You haven't been jumped in yet, but you're rubbing shoulders, dude, and it's a matter of time before you get, I don't know what they do. They're going to tattoo you, whatever it is. You'll be in Antarctica. Something's going to happen.
Maybe it's like Yellowstone. Maybe you get the brand.
You're going to get branded.
Like by the way, I might not get the elite tap, considering Yellowstone's like my favorite show.
You'll have a hood. I'll be the one sacrificed to say, no, 56-year-old man. That's not much.
We're going to sacrifice
my blood's not worth much.
It's definitely going to be you.
Yeah, I'm tainted. But talk to me about who is in charge. We hear a lot about the fact that there's a lateral cooperation between the administration, big tech, corporate America, and the little guy has no say. Blackrock, Vanguard, the people that are running the world. You hear this, Blackrock and Vanguard. Well, you broke it down for me. Every time I have a question, I'm always like, David, this, that, and the other thing. And you look at me and go, that's not even, you're like, what are you talking about? And where are you hearing this stuff?
Well, first of all, let's talk about Blackrock and Vanguard.
Hear this. This is good. So everybody thinks that Blackrock and Vanguard have all the power.
Well, I don't think everybody. I think a couple of very loud voices who have podcasts talk about it, and then people believe it. And, that's what happens. And a lot of people, unfortunately, listen to the loudest voice. And, I think often, social media and the ability to disseminate information in real time at a very low cost allows incredibly brilliant people with great ideas to proliferate them. And it allows people who might have the wrong idea.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, just are misinformed.
Well, it's not just that. It's they're hearing the loudest voice in the room.
And it's sexy.
And by the way, those guys take a thread of truth.
Yes.
It's always easiest to take a thread of truth when you're going to create a narrative, right? So let's look at Blackstone. They manage $10 trillion. That's a lot of money.
Blackstone or BlackRock?
I'm sorry, BlackRock. You're exactly right. Blackstone is
It's
doing fine, but is not
So
managing.
BlackRock manages how much?
About $10 trillion.
What does that mean? Break that down for me.
So most people say, because their CEO believes in, clean environment and believes in diversity, that every decision that organization makes as it relates to controlling the companies that they own stock in, and those companies are going to have to listen to them because they control all this money. The thing about BlackRock and Vanguard in particular is the vast majority of the funds they manage sit in what we call index funds. They sit in funds that are created to own large baskets of stocks at very low cost that allow individual consumers and smaller institutions to very cost effectively play the market. The biggest
In other words, to break it down, I can go buy a bunch of stock that is offered on the S&P 500.
or it is the S&P 500.
It is the S&P 500. And because they can scale costs, it costs me very little in fees.
Right. So you might buy the S&P 500 fund from BlackRock.
Yeah.
They will charge you 0.2% of your total asset value to manage those funds on your behalf.
And everybody should know the reason that's different than it was it used to be you went to E.F. Hutton or whoever, and they had a building with 7 floors and a bunch of MBAs that they were paying 6 figures. Their costs for doing business, they had to charge you a lot of money.
Well, they were charging, to put in perspective, 2 or 3% of assets. Most hedge funds will charge you 2% of assets and 20% of your upside. So when you look at a hedge fund or a private equity fund or a venture fund, 2 and 20 is the standard investment, which means that they have to beat a 2% compounded return in fees on an annual basis. So if you're buying an S&P 500 fund, and that's 0.2%, that means you're 180 basis points ahead before you invest $1.
Guys, if you like this episode, all you got to do is click this link somewhere over here, and it'll take you over to Mug Club, where you can watch the rest of the episode. You can also watch a bunch of other content, namely Louder with Crowder,